What's up, Carlo?
What's up, Rich? Welcome back to Chicago, man.
Man, I'm happy to be back. I gotta tell you. I mean, I enjoyed my time in Daytona. It really was incredible. I mean, the weather you can't beat. Every day I was running on the beach. The facility down there is absolutely incredible. But I loved coming back into the heat.
Yep.
Not heat outside, but the heat on the inside, which is Chicago.
Exactly. Yeah, you didn't bring the heat back with you. It's still a nice, crisp 33 degrees here, but at least you got some color.
I got a little bit of color.
I look white, super white, but I need some of that. I was going to say, probably half of the people are happy that you left, and half of the people are like, oh, man, you really brought some energy to Daytona. So.
Yeah, I would say I brought severe anxiety over there, but I knew how to tone it down a little bit. Just like the Florida lifestyle is definitely it's beach town. It's world's famous beaches.
It's island time.
It's island time. Yeah. There was a little bit of that, but I definitely brought some of that heat. But I was telling you this morning, like having that like heated debate conversation. Me, you, Nick, and Joey, and Marcello. I was like, ooh. I missed that, coming back. So, yeah, it feels good. All right.
We're happy to have you back.
Tell me about the topic. What do we want to talk about today?
All right. Well, actually, I'm really excited about this topic. I'm fascinated by cults and groupthink, and we're going to talk a bit about how to build a cult brand, or at least we did some research on some cult brands and what they did to kind of build their audience and build leadership and team around building a cult brand. So, yeah, we're going to go through a few things that we've seen, but really excited. I personally am fascinated by these type of things. So, but I first want to preface that we're not promoting cults or saying go out and join one, but there's no denying that there are things that cults do well as far as building rapport and just some key takeaways that we can bring into business, I think.
And you're just talking about brands, creating cult mentality or a cult following, and I'm guessing you're going to talk about even the simple stuff like canned water, how a brand has created that much demand when they're just putting water in a can. Right. Is something far beyond my understanding, but so that's really what you're talking about. Right?
You're talking about liquid death, right?
Yep.
Yeah, see, I already know what you're alluding to. Yeah, it's really, obviously you have to have a good product to sustain, and I don't know how well you can make water, but it's they started with marketing and they started with building that audience. And I think if anyone knows much about that, maybe one day we go a little deeper into just piecing out that company itself, but that's their audience is music and punk and rock, and so they really tapped into that, and they did a bunch of collaborations with artists, and that's how they started to build that brand. And of course it's just water in a really badass can that's designed really nicely. But yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's kind of going to be a different perspective as well, because I think one thing that we have as an advantage, we say we live below the fold, so we live underneath those incredible brands, and we're getting also kind of an inside look on how they've been successful and how they've been able to build those brands, because where they're using us or someone like that as a partner for manufacturing.
Exactly.
So yeah, okay, I like it. This is a good topic.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's a fun one for sure.
All right, so tell me where does almost everybody that is tuning into our content has a brand. Start from the top. Where do you start first when you say I have a brand? We all want to build our audience. We all want to monetize, whether it's merchandise or channel or product sales. Where do you start with building a cult brand?
Right. It's like brand, but also entrepreneurship. Whatever the brand is, you could be opening up an automobile service, or you're trying to build a brand, you're trying to build an audience and customer base. But the first thing I think is the story. Is what is the story? And really identifying that path and the journey, what got you to a point to launch that business or even build the brand. I think any company that you can tap into that has a strong story is something that you already start to build rapport with and a connection with. Stories is an incredible thing. And so it's like really dialing that in, not only for the founders to understand the story, but then how do you take that down to your team to tell the story almost better than you can? And then take that even further. How do you get to the point where your customers can tell your story even better than you can? And so, like think about the story and think about the message and the journey. I know for us, we have a bunch of like David versus Goliath moments. And that's where people start to relate, like not to get too deep into our brand, but like think about your own brand of what were some things you had to overcome. The things that if you tell the stories, the listener's like, wow, like that's what you went through. Those are the beginnings. That's how you started. Those are the things you had to overcome to get to the point where you have a brand and now it's successful and you have a team and you're generating revenue. It's like having that story that someone or anyone can relate to, right? And taking it back to a cult is like whatever that story and that message is, and picking the right audience, they start to get this core belief behind it.
Yeah, like they kind of go on that journey with you, like
Exactly.
one this is like a way out there kind of brand is like the brand Rude.
Rude? No,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. So like Rude is it's like a Saks brand, like I would say luxury goods,
Okay,
but
yeah.
now I've never met Rudy. Rudy,
Rugi.
Rugi, yeah, I
Could be
think.
Rugi.
But I just like from social media, like I've saw his story, like I went with him on that journey. And that's resulted from me to buy his products. I've never met him. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. I don't like necessarily like have like a personal connection, but I got to see the journey.
Right.
And so, in building, a brand, that, you could call like, cult-like brand, taking people on that journey is also a huge part of that. Is that right?
Exactly. It's a story, and it's like, if you have an awesome story, cool, that helps. That's like it's natural. You're going to already tell the story, but knowing that story matters with your customer and taking it to staff as well. Like you want your staff to believe that this is the right company that I chose, the right career opportunity, and listen to the story. And are there some David versus Goliath moments that just really, really matter? And then I think that ties to what is the vision, right? So like there's a story, but then it's like, where are you trying to go? What is the vision, which is part of the story? Where you see the company going, 3 to 5 years. I know we always say like we don't even know what the hell's going to happen in 3 years. So
or next month.
Or next month.
Yeah,
So like when we're talking about vision and what our goals are, that's always a funny question. When someone's like, where do you think you're going to find yourself in 10 years? I'm like, I have no idea. Let's talk about the next 12
Alive,
months.
I'm hoping.
Hopefully breathing. Yeah. But it's like, what does the next 6 months look like? And that's part of the vision. That's part of the story. And so if it's compelling enough, then you start to get people to believe in it and start to tell the same story over and over again.
So how about a lot of new brands that come to us now? We're not talking about Rude or Liquid Death or any of these huge success stories. We're talking about new brands coming, and often they're like, hey, what's your minimum order? How do they choose an audience, or what? Like, where should they go first? What's your suggestion?
Well, I think it really, we talk about category all the time. And when it comes to marketing or business, I know for ourselves, it's hard to focus. It's like, there's a shiny object and there's a piece of business that we can go
sports.
after.
Oh,
there's sports.
yeah.
So there's licensing. You can really get into anything. And if you're a business person, an entrepreneur that has to pay the bill, sometimes those shiny objects they look enticing. But I think like from our experience, the advice I would give for anyone starting a brand is really focusing in the category that you own. Focus in the category that you want to own. And that could be sports. And then narrow it down, sports to basketball. Yep. And if it's basketball, and we have a bunch of stories that we can relate to with even our own customer base that is really dialed in to a certain specific lane of business, which is a category. And then that category may already have fans,
right,
and diehards that want to come along.
Yep. Yeah. I think I've noticed most brands that come to us that are, I don't want to say, I guess you say piggybacking, but yeah, they found that they're part of a fan base, and whether that's like the city of Chicago or the Detroit Red Wings or Notre Dame. Notre Dame is like the most insane fans. It seems like I've never
Intense.
been. But like, finding your home in an already big, broad base will allow a brand to say piggyback on top. And as long as you're building an incredible product, that 7 million people that love Notre Dame, or probably far larger than 7 million, but or those 10 million people that live in the state of California, right? You have them as potential clients, and you already do like a soft sell to them already, because you're not trying to say, hey, I'm brand XYZ and I stand for something that I've never heard of before. You're saying I'm aligned with this team or this city or this thought process or working out, or whatever that theme is. You kind of get instant access to that fan base.
Right. You're kind of like tapping into the likeness that already exists. So a lot of successful stories and brands that have done that and done that well, and then putting a great product behind it, a great service. I think it all takes it back to that cult, like, bringing people together with the same common theme. Before we move on from that topic, I think a really fun like story that really matters and connects to this is, you and I were just in LA a couple weeks ago. We got to tour Bella Canvas.
Yep.
Take it back to our industry and merch. Bella Canvas is a brand.
Yep.
And we went there and we did the tour. And shout out to Hillary and our girl Megan over there.
Great tour they did.
Awesome tour. But even the tour was part of the story.
Yeah.
And where we started was they were like, hey, meet us over at Commerce, which is a different part of the city.
Yep.
And we toured the first factory where the yarn was being spun, and like very factory setting. We went there during lunch, so it was like really no one on the production floor. And we really got like a behind the scenes look. And all the while, and we talked about this when we got back, the person giving us the tour, man, did they know the story.
Yeah.
They knew the beginnings.
She sure did. Yeah.
And this person didn't start the company. They weren't the founder. They're probably employee number 1,000 throughout the years the company's been around. But we were impressed. We're like, wow, like, hey, Hillary, you're crushing this story. You're telling it with a passion. You're telling it with like it was your company, like you started it. That's what I'm talking about, with getting the story so good that your staff understands it, they buy into it, and they're telling it even in the audience, even in the tour. It's like very passionate.
Using visuals was good too. Like I liked how they had like the pictures up there. Like, okay, these are the founders, and like these are like, all people that work inside the organization, and these are like older pictures, and like just like tying, seeing something to like the words
like
in the story was
that
was good. That was really
it was a cool
strong.
timeline. And like to finish that point out, it's like we started at Commerce, which was the story was like, here's the humble beginnings. It wasn't always this big. And then we ended up at the Aloe headquarters, which if anyone has been there, wow.
Yeah, incredible.
It is incredible. We were taking pictures and we're like getting inspiration by the way we want to design our own offices.
With a cold plunge.
With a cold plunge, and they had saunas, and it was just incredibly done.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And that was part of the story. So like the story can also relate to your tour, and it can also relate to how you build your website and the timeline and the messaging. So knowing that story is so important, how do you build around that?
Yep. Yeah. So, take me through like what's the next step? Once you have a vision, you build that story. Then you're starting to align yourself with a fan base. How do you get the word out? What is the next step? Like, okay, you have. You may have the most grand product. You may have this amazing story, but how do you tell it?
Right. So you got the story, right? And now it's impactful and people believe it. Now it's like, what's the core belief? And that's the other part, to take it back to a cult, is like, what's the core belief? And merch matters. That's the core belief. Finding people and individuals that believe that same story, right? And so taking it back to like whatever category you own, find the individuals, the organizations, the people that have that same core belief. And if they believe in the same thing, they do think the same thing is still important, and then you hit them with that story, it's like, whoa, like this is connecting. I definitely understand this. One like example, right? And to take it back to our industry, I'm in sales, right? And I want to go get some more customers, some more merch clients. And let's say I'm going after a corporation, Google or whatever, enter company name here. And I go in there and I'm trying to pitch them merch. A core belief that merch matters. Now, maybe that organization is really having problem with team morale. Big corporations often do, right? Mm-hmm. They're having, or something they want to focus on HR is like bringing the team together. Everyone's been working from home and now we brought them back in the office and working on morale. Well, guess what? Being a part of a team, back to the cult thing, is very powerful. Let's do some varsity jackets. Varsity jackets that has your company name on it. Now it's part of a team. I just had a team member start 2 days ago here at Culture Studio. They got culture gear on their first day. The next day he wore it with pride.
Yeah.
Literally, he walked into my office and now he said, look, I got this piece and it fit perfect and it was quality. Like taking it back to a quality piece, not crummy merch, merch that matters. Man, that started to build this rapport and like, I'm proud to be here. I'm part of the team. I believe the story. I too think merch matters.
I think you nailed it for that one. Start with the belief and start with the fan base and then the technical side can be done,
right,
along the way.
It could all be organic. You don't have to spend any money on the story and getting people to believe,
I like that.
And buy. And that's why I like really tying it back to merch and like thinking about that varsity jacket. It's like, all right, let's build this team together. Yep. And now you're working on that very morale and bringing team together. So the next thing like we'll talk about is like the next point I think in building a cult brand or building a following is leadership, right? Leadership is such an important thing that is really purveying that message of the story and everything that they're trying to achieve. And leadership is such a powerful thing. And the leadership that pays attention to every little detail when it comes to branding,
And consistency.
Yeah, right. You're always talking about like, here are our brand guidelines. Don't even think about choosing a different gray or a different, Michelle behind the scenes, she's like smiling. She's from the marketing team. She knows.
Well, a great idea. Can we bring that a little bit on brand?
Yeah. What are our brand guidelines? Let's get back to the brand guidelines. But tell us a little bit about why that's so important to you, like staying on brand.
Yeah, I think, like us humans, like we have a hard time with change. And so even in brand recognition, we have a hard time with change. And I think that is like more like the underlying reason why keeping your brand consistent is because then you have identity with that brand. If you have a different color palette and you have totally different imagery and totally different styles or fonts every single time, then there is no consistency. And ultimately that person is viewing that as constant change. And even, for myself traveling the last, 30 something days, like I'm such a creature of habit. I just feel comfortable in sleeping in my bed and, getting up and going to my gym and like, like as it's putting on matching socks every day, like having a place to go to get socks rather than like rifling through like
in the dark.
Rifling through the dark.
Wake the kids up.
Because you don't want to wake the kids, rifling through this like giant luggage with like stuff thrown everywhere. But back to consistency and branding, like you can look at Pepsi can and not have the logo on it and know it's a Pepsi can. You could drive by a McDonald's and not see the McDonald's. You can instantly tell. And sometimes I think that's pretty much straightforward and like that's a like duh, you should know that. But it isn't easy to hold yourself accountable.
No.
And it's really, really easy to chase whatever is like modern or whatever is like pop culture. This font is like really popular. Okay, no, switch the logo.
Change it.
But then you break that like core being that we all have, which is we're all afraid of change and especially constant change.
Right. Yeah, like brand recognition is so important. And I don't know if you guys ever seen there's like this document out there where they take like the top 20 brands and they only show 25% of the logo. But just by looking at 25% of the logo, you know exactly what it is.
I might need 1%.
Maybe 1%. Yeah. It's like, but that's brand recognition. Yeah. But what's even more powerful and is harder to do is what we're talking about here is like you recognize the logo, but now do you recognize the culture and what they're trying to achieve behind it? Yep. That's the story. It's like, okay, that's a Starbucks logo. I see it. I can identify it. But but when I walk into a Starbucks, I know that it's a place for me to come and sit down and build a community. So it's like, how do you now attach the emotion to the brand? That's when you know you're doing something right, especially with a cult following or a cult brand.
Nice, man. I think we got some good stuff here. I think actually this could probably lead down, like I said, the technical side of, growing an audience, maybe the technical side of how you make, like a full, merch line, or how do you build an e-commerce store properly? So, I'll tell you what, man, I'm happy to be here in Chicago in the studio with you. Let's get it on.
Let's do it. Happy to have you back.